Tide Talk with Webb is back, man. We're just going to go over the games of the weekend. First off, Alabama just whipped the hell out of the bye week. I mean, we beat the living crap out of them. So we did really good there. Let's go down some of the bigger top 25 games of the week. They were pretty good. Like I said, we had Memphis and Rice. There was really no contest. We knew Memphis was going to win that big, 38-14. Like I said, their quarterback did really good, 18-22. 225 yards. It was 38-14. Like I said, it was just kind of over. They didn't have a lot of competition. We called the Ohio State versus Penn State game 38-14. Julian Sayin had a really good game. He was 20 of 23, 316 and 4 TDs. Running back Jackson had 13 carries for over 100 yards. Tate, the really great wide receiver they had, he had 5 recoveries, 124 yards and 1 TD. I mean, they just balled out. Penn State is at a loss. They're having a hard time. They don't have a coach. It's just they're not playing for anything. They're not even playing to have a winning season. Like I said, they're not even 500 ball at this point. They're 0-5 in Big Ten conference play, so they're kind of done. I guess their next thing is trying to keep a roster together, and then from there try to get a coach. You've got Indiana and Maryland. That really wasn't a game either. They were playing Little Sisters of the Deaf and Blind. I mean, they're barely 500 ball. Maryland is 55-10. Their quarterback, Indiana's quarterback Washington, had a great game, 16 of 31, 242 yards and a TD. The running back Black had over $110 rushing. The receiver had about 100 yards receiving. So it was kind of a no-brainer. Georgia and Florida, it was a better game than I thought. And the reason I say this, it was 24-20. Florida gave them everything they wanted, despite Florida being 2-3 in the conference and 3-5 overall. They're still playing with a lot of moxie. They're still playing with a lot of fight. They haven't given up the fight, and they're a better team than the record shows. Like I said, Stockton, for Georgia had a good day, 20 of 29, 223 yards, 2 touchdowns with 1 INT. Doing great. The rushing was pretty good. Like I said, it was, the rushing, for Florida, I mean, they had 72 yards and a TD. Their one really good wide receiver, Wilson the third, man, he had 9 recoveries, 121 yards and 1 touchdown. Like I said, they just had bad quarterback play at the end, and they just couldn't keep up. But they took Georgia to the wire. They really did. I mean, there was a lot of the game Georgia was not leading. Like I said, the biggest cocktail party in the world, it lived up to its billing. And that's one of those games that's a really great rivalry in the Southwest or Southeast Conference. It's not usually ever a blowout. It's very rare that it's a blowout. Like I said, Georgia looks strong. They're building momentum. Georgia is not a great first half team. See where Bama, they're not a great second half team sometimes. They struggle a little bit coming out the gate, where Georgia's the other way. They're not a great first half team, but they come out good in the second half. Georgia, found a way to win. That's what winning ball clubs do when you struggle. I mean, like I said, you look at all the quarters. The first quarter, Georgia had 7 points. Florida had 10. Second quarter, Georgia had 3 points. Florida had none. Third quarter, they each had a touchdown. Fourth quarter, Georgia got another touchdown. Fourth quarter, Florida just got 3 points. Like I said, it's one of those deals. It was ultimately the fourth quarter was the difference in the game, and Florida just couldn't convert when they had chances to convert 4th and 1 and stuff like that. That was the biggest difference between them. They just could not convert. Then the second game was South Carolina and Ole Miss. I said this, it was going to be a fight, absolutely going to be a fight. Like I said, I know a lot of people think Lenore Sellers, the quarterback for South Carolina, is going to be a first-round pick. I don't think so. I think he's more of a fourth-round guy. But he's like a Cam Newton without the great arm. So he's going to give you fits. He's going to give you problems. He's going to give you headaches. He's hard to bring down half the time. You saw Bama. We thought we had him in the backfield wrapped up. And he's like Houdini. He just gets out there, and he'll get 10 yards, 15 yards, whatever, running. But Ole Miss did come out with a win, 30-14. Like I said, they put a lot of yards up on the ground and kept it going. But ultimately, they just South Carolina gave way to the better team that is Ole Miss. This was a surprise. You had Georgia Tech and NC State playing. I really thought Georgia Tech was going to come out and just lock it down. And like I said, Georgia Tech's defense, I mean, I'm sorry, when Georgia Tech, you put up 36 points and NC State puts up 48, that's on your defense. I mean, you look at King's performance, the Georgia Tech quarterback. You know, he was 25 of 35, 400 plus yards, 2 touchdowns. But dadgum, what more can you ask out of that guy? You know, the receiver for Georgia Tech had a buck 10. You know, a huge difference in this game that I saw. You know, the first, second, third, and fourth quarters, NC State put up double-digit points. But a really big difference was Jay Scott, the running back for NC State, on 24 carries, he had 3 yards shy of 200 yards rushing, 196 yards. That's embarrassing for a defense. That defensive line, you guys got to wake up. I mean, this team is barely over 500. I mean, NC State is 2-3 in the conference and 5-4 overall. This game, from what I saw, I'm sorry, it wasn't the quarterback play, it wasn't the offense. It was the defense. They didn't lock it down. So that lost them the game. That was the ultimate factor in that. The other game that we had talked about earlier that we thought was big was Texas playing Vanderbilt. You know, a little bit in the favor of Texas because, you know, it was at Texas. They had a big home crowd, so that helps. I got to give I got to give credit to Vanderbilt. They were losing bad in the third quarter, and they came back. Like I said, Popvia, he was awful game. First 3 quarters, 2.5 quarters bad. But he came back. He was 27 of 38, 365, and 3 TDs. So the offense didn't give the game away. This was on the defense. Again, this was on the defense not making plays when they had to make plays. Pavia also had 43 rushing yards. Overall, the team, and this was a big factor now, and we talk about this a lot in the games, the team for Vanderbilt, they had 58 rushing yards. I mean, now wide receiver play, Stovers, I mean, great underweighted receiver for Vanderbilt. He had 7 catches, 146 yards, 2 TDs. Great, phenomenal performance there. But let me go ahead and give kudos to Manning. We've been on Manning. We've made fun of him. There's all these reels on Instagram or whatever making fun of him, talking about he's the new Uncle Rico and the way he throws, and he didn't look good. But let's give credit where credit's due on this now, okay? The team barely had 100 rushing yards. But Manning was 25 of 33, 328 yards, and he had 3 TDs. That was a big performance for him. That was a great thing for him to kind of get the monkey off his back, proverbially, as they say, or the bad juju, whatever he's dealing with. That was big. That was very big for him. Like I said, and he was part of the reason, one of the biggest reasons they won this game. The defense did not have a great day. When you let somebody put up 31 points, that's you having a rough outing. But the great offensive play helped them out. Now, Texas' defense faltered in the fourth quarter. They gave up 21 unanswered points in the fourth quarter. Texas didn't put up jack in the fourth quarter. They came up big, though, and they did what they had to do as a team, and that's what championship teams do. Now, I think Texas is out of the race for the playoffs. Unfortunately, I think they're just out. They still have a tough road to hoe going forward. Another game that came up that is kind of disappointing, man. I mean, Miami, the remaining games were against unranked opponents. I mean, they were playing the Little Sisters of the Deaf and Blind, and I don't know if they didn't get up for the games. Now, we know that the old Carson Beck is showing back up. He's throwing picks in bad times. He's putting his defense in bad situations. And you just can't do that, man. Like I said, SMU beat them 20-26 in overtime. They get to overtime, and what happens? The old Georgia Carson Beck shows up. First early plays of that drive, boom, INT, done. And all SMU has to do is get on their side of the field and kick a field goal, but they scored a touchdown. That was the nail in the coffin. And then that was also the nail in the coffin. I don't think Miami's even in the running for playoffs. I'm sorry. You got beat by 2 unranked teams. The rest of your teams are all unranked. I just don't see where you're eligible to go to the playoffs. I'm sorry. You're just not. Like I said, it's one of those things. You're putting your defense in a bad spot. And, I mean, and kudos to SMU, because the SMU, This is the first home win versus a top 10 team since 1974. So that's big for them. The next game we didn't really think much about it. I mean, Notre Dame struggled against Boston, but they ultimately won 25-10. Not much to say there. Carr for the Notre Dame had a pretty good performance, 18-25, 299 yards and 2 TDs. Like I said, rushing, Notre Dame's got a great running back in Love. He had 17 carries, 136 on the ground and 2 touchdowns. Not much to say. You're playing the Little Sisters of the Deaf and Blind with Boston. And another game, we had Texas Tech playing Kansas. Kansas tried to kind of rally late in the third and fourth, but it was just too little, too late. Texas Tech won 43-20. Another great performance from Morton, quarterback for Texas Tech. He was 21 of 32, 249, and 2 TDs. They also had a great run game. I don't think Texas Tech gets enough credit, but their running back Williams had 17 carries, 135 yards, and a TD. So that was not really a contest. A great game. We called it here. We said that Oklahoma and Tennessee was going to be a big game, and it was. It lived up to the billing. Like I said, Tennessee, again, just could not come up where it counted, and they struggled. Like I said, Aguilar had a great game. This, to me, is more of a fault on the defense because the defense is not good. Tennessee's offense can score on anybody, but their defense usually lets them down. A lot of times, too, there was plays in the game late that they could have converted and got close and maybe tied it up. There was a famous one, I think it was 4th and 1. Great play call by Heupel and his offensive staff. They rolled out. Everybody went left. Aguilar went right. Kitzelman rolled right. I think it was Kitzelman. Or maybe, no, I'm not going to say it was Kitzelman. I don't think it was. But it was one of their tight ends. He turns around and it hits him right in the face, bounces off his face mask. It's like, son, you got to catch that. That's something that would win or lose games, and that was one of the plays that ultimately lost that game. Aguilar had a great game. It wasn't on quarterback play. It was 29 out of 45, 393, and 3 touchdowns. They even had, like I said, pretty good receiver play. Matthews had almost 100 yards and a touchdown. They ran the ball decent. Like I said, Oklahoma came up with the big plays, man. Like I said, I think Tennessee's defense let them down. Now, there were some offensive plays. Like I said, when Aguilar rolled right, 4th and 1, great play. When it hits your tight end in the face mask, that's on your offense. But, ultimately, at Tennessee, you put up 27 points. Your defense has got to give you a few stops. They just got to. So Oklahoma won that game. Honestly, Oklahoma's playing on life support, trying to get in the playoffs. They got 2 losses. They had 3-2 in the conference, 7-2 overall. Tennessee is 6-3 and 3-3 in the SEC conference. I think they're out of the playoffs, but they still have a lot to play for. They still can go to a nice bowl game. So not over with yet. Both teams have a tough road to hoe. Still have a lot of SEC games to play, so it remains to be seen. We've got Virginia. They played Cal. Cal kept it somewhat close. 31-10 Virginia. Another good performance for Morris, the UVA quarterback. Like I said, they also had a buck on the ground and 2 TDs from the running back Taylor. Virginia had a great performance. Louisville and Virginia Tech, it kind of was 28-16. Another great performance. From Louisville, they did great. They're still doing good. They're still in the hunt in the ACC, so good for them. Cincinnati and Utah, this was surprising. I said Utah could probably keep it close. They're kind of on a hot streak. They're a little shifty. So I thought it could be up in the air. Did not see this coming. Excuse me. 45-14 Utah. I mean, they just took it to them. Absolutely just took it to them. Wow. It just, all 4 quarters, they almost had double digits all 4 quarters. Cincinnati came out flat. First and third, they scored 7 and 7, and that was it. Flat performance, looking bad. 5-1 in the Big 12. 7-2 overall. It was a bad showing. Like I said, didn't see it coming, but hats off to Utah. You got Purdue and Michigan. It was okay. Michigan, they're slinking by 5-1 in the Big 10 because they're playing nobody. 7-2 overall, playing Purdue, the Little Sisters of the Deaf and Blind. 21-16. But win is a win, so we don't shirk any win, no matter how close it is, by inch or a mile. West Virginia played Houston. Didn't see this one coming either. West Virginia put it on them. They're 3-6 overall and 1-5 in the Big 12. Houston, going into that game, was 4-1 and 7-1 overall. Houston, they got bodied, 45-35. I mean, I did not see that coming. This was on their defense. I'm sorry, this was on Houston defense. When you look at the quarterback play of Wegman, Houston quarterback, he was 25 of 35, 309 and 4 TDs. Yeah, I mean, okay, like that's on the defense. At some point, your defense got to stand up. Didn't see this one coming either. But hats off to USC. USC found a way to beat Nebraska, 21-17. Like I said, they had a good outing. They just scrapped and fought and fought. Had a bad first quarter, but they just kept at it, and they finally won, 21-17. So they found a way. Let's get back into the other big news of the day is who are these coaches? Who are these schools that are firing all these coaches? You know, Hugh Freeze got fired today. I think we all saw that coming because, you know, you had a nobody in Kentucky that just is horrible. Probably the worst team in the SEC. Auburn tried 2 quarterbacks and they got 3 points against Kentucky. The worst team in the SEC, you got 3 points. Embarrassing for them. You know, so they fired their coach. You know, some of these places I think coaches are going to be afraid to go to. And a big reason is you get 3 years, and if you can't do anything, well, screw you, we're going to fire you. You know, Florida has that problem for over a decade. Auburn definitely has that. Some of this is lingering. Some of this, you know, Florida's problem is they still think they can get a diamond in the rough, which was Urban Meyer. You've got LSU who thinks they're Alabama and they're not. And those problems have compounded with them. And, you know, to be fair, Brian Kelly was not a good fit. I said it on my show. A lot of people said it on their show. Everybody said that. You know, he came in there and was having the fake Cajun accent and talking mess, and people really weren't buying it. You probably would have been better off keeping Coach Orgeron. You probably would have been better having him for another year. But I think Kelly, and I didn't understand why LSU did this. You took a guy who never won a national championship, never played in a hard conference, and gave him a massive contract, and then you had, you know, $53 million buyout. Like, what are we doing here? You know, I think there's more a systemic problem. I think you're giving these crazy 10-year contracts that people shouldn't be having for the record they've shown you in the past. Maybe you should only be paying them $5 million a year and have a back-end contract that's heavy laden on if you win this many games in conference, if you get to the SEC championship, if you win the SEC championship, if you get to the playoffs, if you win a game in the playoffs, if you win a natty. There's all these things that should be back laden with money. Okay, well, you do this and this, that $5 million a year contract, you can make $12 million that year if you do this, this, and this. You know, I think a lot of these teams think there's just a Nick Saban waiting around the corner. You know, the best coach in the country right now still going is Kirby Smart. I hate to say it, but that's the fact of the matter, whether anybody wants to admit it or not. And there's only 3 coaches, we talked about this before, that have natties. You know, you got Ryan Day, you got Dave Sweeney, and you got Kirby Smart. And one thing that I think a lot of people should take a play from is the playbook of Cincinnati. What they've done the last almost 15 years, they have literally gone to Division 2 and 3 and gotten the best coach out of there. The longest tenured coach that's the most winning, they will go there and they will take them. And it always happens. They start winning and they do really good. Cincinnati does. And then a big school comes and takes them. And they go back and they keep going back to the well. Some of these big schools probably need to do some of that. You know, or you're going to have to take a chance. You know, like LSU, I think you should go get Joe Brady. He was your passing coordinator. People loved him. He's a great recruiter. I'd probably go hire him. You know, yes, you can get some of those OCs and DCs to do it. But that's where we're at. You know, Auburn they got, to me, one of the best defenses in the SEC, regardless of what the record says. Maybe you should hire that defensive coordinator. You know, another problem that is sneaking up on these teams is if you wait too long, you've already passed the early signing period, which everybody signs in, and you've already passed the first portal. So that's right there. You're up against that, which is very scary. And that's something also to consider. But these contracts, I think, going forward, you're going to have coaches not making $15 million a year, $10 million a year, whatever it is. I think you're going to have to pay them less and have more of a contract that's laced with lots of incentives, and then spend some more money because, you know, a great offensive coordinator right now is going to cost you 1.5. 1.1 to 1.5 million. That's a fact. The DC is probably the same way, and also the support staff. So that's some things to look at, and I think teams need to take a really serious look at the Brian Kelly firing, the Jimbo Fisher firing. You can't be giving extensions to these guys, these 10-year contracts that are just all this money guaranteed. No, you give them a 5-year contract, some money guaranteed, and then a lot of incentives, right? So you got time to grow. The expectations aren't through the roof for that person, and that's why I think we need to be. And I think teams going forward are probably going to have to do more of that to get in that sphere. Another thing, you see another thing that I find very funny or very interesting, not funny, but interesting. You've got, like at Michigan, you've got this kid, their quarterback, you paid him $12 million, and he's done nothing. You're putting him out there early. You can't develop him at all. I mean, look how Saban did it. He had all these quarterbacks, but he developed them. They weren't starting first year as a freshman. Maybe if they were a sophomore, if they were all world. And that's a problem with NIL. You can't. I know you pay the guy $12 million, so you want his behind out there. But you can either ruin the kid, or he just doesn't pan out and you paid all this money. I think some of that is going to have to look at too. You may say, okay, you can come here to get this money. If you get out after your first year and get in the portal, you owe us 75% of that money back. This is a contract. It's a business. This is not you just come here and we give you money. That's something I think in the future will be looked at as long as these coaching contracts. But I'm telling you, the Cincinnati model is something to look at. I don't think you need to pay all this money to the head coaches. I think you pay them about $5 million a year, have their contract heavily laced with incentives, and then go out there and get some better offensive and defensive coordinators. But I think Division II and III, these schools are overlooking. They're wanting to get we got to get that big hire. We got to get that big hire. Bama got lucky. I'll admit it. Saban stepped down in a good part of the year where not a lot of teams were firing coaches. He stepped down, and we were able to get, I thought, DeBoer, and still think DeBoer was a great hire for us. But this year there are so many schools firing their coaches. You're not going to get a big name hire. So you're going to have to dip into the Division II and Division III. Look at some of those offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators. We see these guys, and I feel like they get pigeonholed because, well, you're Division II or you're Division III. Look at some of that. Look at some of those guys and say, man, he's putting up the best amount of points the last 5 years as an OC, as a DC, whatever. He's doing these great things. Let's give him a contract and highly incentivize it and give him NIL money. Let's see what this guy can do. I think those two divisions get overlooked mightily by Division I. It's like you get this Division II and III stink on you because you're not Division I. They're like, well, we're going to get the number one Division I OC. And that's what they do. I think that Dabo Swinney will be an interesting look at maybe getting hired. Now his problem is if you hire him, you're going to have to put in his contract, hey, bud, you're going to use NIL and this is the money you have to do it. And if you're going to play that garbage ball of, hey, you're going to come to Clemson or you're going to come to wherever because you have love for the school, those days are over. These kids are pro athletes now. They're getting paid. So wake up and get with the times. Brian Kelly, I think, is still a good hire for some teams. Now, I think the best fit for him is Penn State. I've said it. He's a Midwestern guy. He knows recruiting there. He knows the landscape. He's good with NIL. Give him a shot. For LSU, you may have to go with a top defensive or offensive coordinator to hire. You may have to get a no name out of the Division II and III. I mean, it's just where we're at in college football. And I think a lot of these schools, like I said, are going to be re-looking at these 10-year massive contracts when the guys have done nothing. $5 million a year, heavily incentive-laced. I think that's where we're going. Like I said, I think that's where we're at. And Lane Kiffin is a great adage of this because he took a quarterback nobody wanted Division II, Chambliss, who was great in Division II. And he said, I'll bring him up to Division I. He'll be backup quarterback. Turns out his quarterback got hurt. He had to put him in the line of fire. He's doing great. He's doing great with that team. That's another thing. Look at some of these Division II quarterbacks. Instead of getting a Jackson Arnold like Auburn, which was the death knell in Hugh Freeze, go get the number 2 best quarterback out of Division II. And I think that's where people need to start looking for some of these coaches and different things. I think we'll head that way as we get. But it's going to be a very interesting year as we wind down. as people are calling people. I guarantee Saban's been called and he's told them no. I guarantee Lane Kiffin's been called and he's told them no. One thing I don't understand, this just grinds my gears, because people are like, call John Gruden. For what? To ruin a team? To ruin a franchise? I mean, we saw what he did with Tony Dungy's team. Tony Dungy stays one more year, he probably wins 2 Super Bowls with that Bucks team. John Gruden comes in there, wins one just because he had a Cadillac. All he had to do was not wreck it. And then he destroyed the Bucks. What did he do at Oakland? Destroyed the whole franchise. The guy's not a good coach. I don't understand why everybody thinks that John Gruden is worth a darn. I wouldn't pay him $1 million to coach a Pee Wee team. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't want him coaching my high school team. I don't think he's a good coach. I think he's trash, hot garbage on a summer day. I'm not being mean to the guy. He's probably a very nice guy. He's a hard worker. I just don't think he's a great head coach. He's probably a great defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator or whatever, but I don't have faith in him as a head coach at all. Now I will say this: if you're a team looking for a coach, look at McElwain. Look at, when he coached at Alabama for their offensive coordinator, he was great. When he coached at Colorado State, he was great. He was still good at Florida. I don't care what anybody said. His record was very good. And he went to multiple SEC championships and had great teams and lost. But you know what? Just for poops and giggles, let's look up what McElwain's record was at Florida. Because he did great things and got fired because he was in that whole garbage wheel that they've got about Florida, that whole hamster wheel about, if you don't win in 2 years, you're fired. So what was McElwain's record at Florida? Sorry, I know this is looking this up, but I think it's important to see what his record was. Okay, he was 22-12 overall. He achieved a 19-8 SEC record during his first 2 seasons. His tenure included winning the SEC Eastern Division title in both 15 and 16. And if you look at how many injuries he had, and they ripped one of his best quarterbacks in the SEC away from him mid-season, and he still did that. I'm telling you, this guy did not get a fair shake at Florida. I'm telling you, this is a really good coach that nobody's looking at. And, if you're like an Auburn, maybe you look at the guy. Maybe if you're a Penn State, maybe look at the guy. He was not given a fair shake at Florida. It was ridiculous. And it was only because he didn't win now. And his record was good. Florida would kill to have a 22-12 record and go to the last 2 SEC championships. I'm telling you. I don't understand it. Like I said, it's mind-numbing that he got canned. Like I said, but we're in that whole era, and it is what it is. So anyway, more to come later in the week. We'll do a pre-Alabama LSU look and see where that's going. But anyway, y'all have a great weekend. Ty Taco Web is out.